I'm going to show you how I would add a texture backdrop into an image. Again, there's many ways that you can actually add textures into images, but the way that I like to do it is I'll just go and drag and drop a texture into the image so it creates a new layer. I'd resize the texture as well so it covers the whole of the image. That you might want to do parts of the image or something like that, but this is how to do it on a whole image. So what I would do is I would add once I've got the image in there, I'd change the blending mode. Now for me, most of my images that I put textures on, I blend it as a soft light. However, if I've got like a dark image and I want to put a smoke overlay onto it, I would actually do that probably in screen or something like that, but obviously as you can see for this image, screen wouldn't work with that texture. It doesn't blend very well, so soft light tends to be the easiest one or the best one for me for this. What I'd do is I'd add a layer mask to the actual texture. Let me just change my brush to a soft round brush. What I would then do is I would go around the whole image and remove, let's change that to black, and remove all of the texture off of the subject, because obviously you don't want it to fit. Now what I would do is I normally go around rough to start off with and get as much off as I possibly can. Then I'll show you what I do after that. So I go like round the image basically probably twice. I zoom in and I look at it in great detail as well, because obviously I don't want to leave texture on a body part that doesn't look right, or also I don't want to wipe it off of the background and then that also doesn't look right. So what I do is I also push the backstroke key on my keyboard, and then that brings up and it shows you in red the areas that you've masked and the areas that you've missed. As you can see, like I've missed quite a bit of this image where I went around quite quickly. So I'd zoom in, maybe a little bit too far, reduce my brush size down, and then I go round and I do all the detail as well. So then I can just flick between having the black brush and the white brush on and off to get my lines there or thereabouts. It does take a little while, but it gives you a better result. I find it better using this option than if I was to use the option of erasing the texture, or using grey to paint over the texture. This tends to give me the best results. So as you can see, I'm just going around all the edges, and then I can switch by pressing X on my button on my keypad to go back the opposite direction and paint white back in to bring the texture back. I always use a soft brush for this. Now the main reason for this is because I want it to go a bit softer around the edges, and the bigger the soft brush, the more softer the edges will become. Oops, my X. As you get smaller, the spread of the brush gets smaller, so you can get in quite tight, but then also sometimes you need it just to bleed over just a small little bit to give it a bit more of a realistic feel to it. So while I'm doing this here, let's go around generally speaking, like the small little hairs on the arms, I wouldn't worry too much about. Again, if that was flyaway hairs on someone's head, I might not necessarily worry about it. It depends on what the image looks like. If it does need doing, then I'd go in and I'd select a mask, and I'll show you in another video how I do my selection of masks, because again, I think it's different to the way most people do it, because I don't particularly like the way that sometimes Photoshop does the selecting and masking. I've got used to doing it one way now, and for that reason I always use the same way. I can't, when I just go in and press select and mask, it doesn't seem to work well for me. X, go back. I'm doing this quite rough to get done quite quickly, just to show you. Now you'd probably want to take a little bit more time. Normally I take a lot more time and get right in between the backdrop and the person or the object. But I always always do it with this red mask over, because you can see very clearly where you've gone over the lines and where you haven't gone over the lines, and it is quite important, definitely for competition prints or competition entries, that you need to make sure that you don't have the texture either on the body, or you don't lose too much texture from the background. Now if we take a look at that, as you can see, this texture, I've purposely picked a strong texture for this image for the example. What this does is it makes it not look realistic. You've got a very soft image and you've got very strong texture to the backdrop, so it does look like it's been cut out around the texture. So what I would do is I'd go into the actual texture, click on the texture, go up to filter, go to blur, go to Gaussian blur, and I'd start at the bottom and work my way up, blurring the background to see at what point do I want it. As you can see, it gives it, the more you blur it, depending on what kind of texture you've got, the more it would make the image pop. But sometimes you can't go too far with it, obviously, otherwise there'd be no point putting the texture on there if you're blurring it out that much. And what it does do is it gives you a bit of a I don't know if you can see it, it gives you a bit of a banding, but that's where the texture is on it. But one of the reasons why we use these textures is to get rid of banding out of your image. So I'd say that for this image I think I'm quite happy with it to be there. Now obviously again, be careful what texture backdrops you're picking, because you don't want it to be too much for the image, and you don't want it to take away. You want it to add to the image, not take away from the image. So I will leave it there, and I will have a couple more videos on textures as well, on how to do textures on a full body to make it look realistic where it meets the floor and that it doesn't look like someone's floating in midair. Any questions, please feel free to ask and come join our group.